Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 107 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, the Amsterdam edition, as the wolf is settling in Amsterdam for a bit these days. I got to tell you, it's a little colder than it was in London and maybe even rainier. Didn't see that coming, but it is fun to be in Amsterdam. And I'm excited to have some stuff lined up for next year, including the outset of the Metallica 2-year world tour where they do 2 nights in a town and they don't play the same song on either night. That's right. There'll be 2 totally different set lists every time they hit a city. And they're kicking it off in Amsterdam in April 2023. And the Wolf's going to be at both shows. So look forward to reviews of those coming your way in about 5 months or so, maybe 6. But we appreciate everybody tuning into our show on Aerosmith's Permanent Vacation last week. It was a fun one for me and Jackson to review. Big comeback for them. An important time in our lives as teenagers with them all over MTV. And we thought it'd be fun on the 35th anniversary of that record to make sure we talked about that one. And we had some great comments on there, and we really appreciate them. We're staying on that memory lane thing here, doing another anniversary, an album turning 40 this year, squeezing it in before the end of 2022, came out in 1982, and that's Van Halen's Diver Down, which sold 4 million copies in the US, but almost didn't come to pass. Van Halen had just finished up the Fair Warning tour. They were tired. They were going to get a vacation finally after about 5 years of working hard, record tour, and all that. But they put out a single. It was a cover, Oh Pretty Woman, the Roy Orbison classic, and it hit the charts. So then Warner Brothers said, hey, I got a hit single. We got to have a record to go with it. You got to make an album. So instead of getting vacation, they ran in 12 days. They produced Diver Down, which is chock full of covers, which is why it gets a lot of guff from Van Halen fans and hard rock fans. You've got Eddie Van Halen, the world's most extraordinary guitar player. You've got Diamond David Lee Roth, this flamboyant lead singer, and you come out and do Happy Trails and Where Have All the Good Times Gone? Are you kidding me? But it still got in the charts. It still sold over 4 million in the US, and it still set them up for incredible success with 1984, which would be coming in the next 24 months after the release of this. So we decided to dive into this before the 2022 was out. Well, it's still the 40th anniversary of Diver Down, and talk about how we came to it. And even though it's very short, it's only 31 minutes, we'll manage to talk about it for about twice that amount of time. You know us. Now, as usual, we have to give shout outs because we are a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network with nearly 100 shows, all music, all genres. There's something in there for everybody. And we like to give shout outs to the folks who've been on our show or who've had us on their show, like Jay Scott at The Hook Rocks, like Christy Alexander Hallberg of Rock is Lit, like Martin Popoff of History in 5 Songs, like Paul Stevenson of Vintage Rock Pod and This Day Rocks. And could never do this without Paul. He's a huge supporter of ours, and we really appreciate that, Paul. And of course, we give shout outs to the Kiss Kings themselves, Tom and Zeus of the Shout It Out Loudcast, the #1 Kiss podcast in the world. We appreciate the shout outs that you give us on your show, guys. And of course, we also have to give shout out to our incredible sponsor, rarevinyl.com. Guys, there's a little time left before the holidays, right? You're looking for that special something for your rock and roll fan in your life? Go to rarevinyl.com. They've got over 250,000 items in stock. They ship all over the world. They take great care to make sure it gets to you in pristine condition. And you can use the code PODCAST, PODCAST, to get 10% off, not only the first order, but with every order you make from rarevinyl.com over the years. They have an incredible selection. Really, most any band that you want. It's not just records. It might be CDs. It could be singles. It could be tour programs, maybe a ticket stub, whatever. Go to rarevinyl.com, use code podcast, save yourself 10%. You'll be glad that you did. And of course, we want you to subscribe and download wherever you get your podcast, Apple, iTunes, Spotify. Good Pods is very good to us. Go to Good Pods. You can see us in the top 10 and top 20 music lists. And that always makes us feel real good. Plus, you can send us notes on there and let us know what you're thinking about. So it's a fun way to interact with us and with other podcasters. Definitely recommend Good Pods. But please, if you're thinking about it, please give us a good positive review. It just helps us find more rock and roll fans like you. Now back to Van Halen. In the late 80s, I was a huge Van Halen fan. I would have put Van Halen in my top 3, certainly top 5 bands of all time. They were running with Sammy. They were doing bigger albums, big tours, big hits with Sammy Hagar and their band. 1988 saw the release of OU812 when we were in high school. Right before we went to college, they did For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge with Ed playing with the drill on his guitar and Pound Cake. and we couldn't wait to see them live. And I think it was the first concert that Jackson and I actually saw together was Van Halen in the Orlando Arena in fall of 1991 with Alice in Chains opening for them. So that's a special memory for us. So we thought we'd go back to this album because it's Diver Down is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. And it's also a little controversial with all the covers, but it's still an important part of the catalog. So why don't you join us? Okay, Jackson and I are going deep on Diver Down by Van Halen right here in The Wolf. And I know for years we've kind of, and it's not just us, it's Van Halen fans, it's rock fans who've kind of dogged the Diver Down album, not only because of all the covers, but because it's very short. You know, it's like 31 minutes and that's about it. But the fact of the matter is, Fair Warning was only like 7 seconds longer, and it came out the year before. Now, I think they get a little bit of leeway there because it had Unchained on it, which is badass. But yeah, I mean, between the covers and the brevity of the record, this is an odd one. I mean, I like it, but I understand why people have issues with Diver Down.
And I could see how you would have been concerned or confused if you had just picked the record up in 1982. Like sight unseen, you were a huge Van Halen fan. Okay, boom, next one comes out. Here we go. What is this? What did I just listen to? It's very silly. There's a lot of covers. I know that I don't think Fair Warning went over as well as they thought it would. Fair Warning is dark, it's nasty, it's greasy, but it's all original. And I think they were looking for a change of pace. I think Warner Brothers really did not like Fair Warning. They wanted more hits, even though, to your point, Unchained is probably one of the best songs they've ever done. Mean Streets is a great song. I really like that record. I just think it kind of fell flat, especially in the sales category. Even though it did go platinum, they were looking for something different on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it actually, sold a couple million copies, so that's pretty good, But look, the single in the US and the opening single was So This Is Love, it's a decent Van Halen song. It's not one that people clamored for throughout the 80s and the 90s. Unchained was released as a single, but really in Europe and not in America. You kind of had to hunt it down if you're an American rock fan. Same with Mean Street, released in Europe, not in America. But here's what I didn't realize in doing a little research for this record. They came off the tour for Fair Warning, all right? And then they were going to get a vacation. They're going to get a rest because, really it was like 78's first album. 78 is Van Halen 2. 1980s Women and Children First. 1981 is Fair Warning. And they're touring all the time for that. It's like, okay, you guys are going to get to take a break. Cool. It's like, all right, but we want to do something so people don't forget us. And they like Pretty Woman, right? So they go in and they cut Pretty Woman, which is obviously a cover, Roy Orbison classic.
Right.
Dave loves to do covers, we can tell. And so, yeah, they go back and they do that. They back it with Happy Trails because they could rip that pretty easily, right? It's an old Dale Evans song. We can put that on the B-side, great. And so we'll put this out so people don't forget about us, and then we'll go take a break for a little while. Well, they do that, and then Pretty Woman goes on the charts. And of course, the record company's like, hey there, boys, we got a hit. Now we need another album. It's like, no, we don't want to do an album. We want to take a break. It's like, no, you can't. If you've got a hit single, you've got to have an album to promote it, right? So they went in 12 days and recorded the rest of Diver Down. So for something they basically did in 12 days, I think it's pretty good. But that kind of tells you more of the story, doesn't it?
Right. And I think the total price tag on it was like $46,000, which was less than their debut record. So yeah, I mean, it was quick, it was dirty, and I think to your point, it was something they didn't really want to do at the time. You get to that point where you're just exhausted. You just want to break. And the record company which it seems weird. You've got 4 records that went platinum. This would go platinum, but you're still worried about people forgetting about us. And if we take 6 months or a year off, I mean, that's the record company slave driver mentality of, I don't care, get back in there and work.
And that's Warner Brothers, correct? They were in Warner Brothers all those years? Yeah.
Correct.
So, but now it kind of, to their credit, it kind of worked because Fair Warning was not a huge hit, but this went quadruple platinum in the United States. Diver Down. So you make it for $46,000, and then you sell 4 million copies in the U.S. alone, more than 5 million around the world. I hate to say the record company was right, because I'm always on the artist's side. I'm always on the artist's side. But, it kind of worked out for them. And then they did take a little time before they got to 1984, which really paid off.
Right. Because they released that at the end. Well, they released it in 84, but like I think January 1st of 84, which everybody went nuts for in the record business, because I guess you just don't do that. Yeah, but
the band wanted to release it on December 31st, 1983, just so it didn't come out in 1984. And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, we'll do that. And then, it's like January 9th or whatever it was. But I mean, that's a diamond selling record. That's one of the really big ones. And thanks to MTV, that was huge for Van Halen. But this is the one that preceded it. So how, before I get into my story, I want to know how you ever came to the record Diver Down.
It had to be in high school. That would mean it was after 1984 and probably after 5150 also.
Oh, yeah.
Then it was like, because 84 was huge. We've talked about that. We did a whole episode on that, and how when it was coming out on MTV, it was big for me. I had a copy of the record.
Wait. We have not reviewed 1984 on the show yet.
Yeah, we have. We did a whole.
We have done the first record. We have not done 1984 yet. We've been
haven't?
saving it. No, we're saving it.
Well, I need to stop drinking before I come on the show then. All right. Well, then there you have it then. So I fell in love with it. And then 5150 came out, different deal, but it was Van Halen was back.
Right.
So then I think I worked into it from there. Somebody had a copy of it. So I had already, and so that's what I was trying to think about for this review, was how, when I heard it, what else did I have kind of in the memory bank to go off of?
Right.
And a lot of it was Crazy from the Heat had already come out with Just a Gigolo and California Girl. So I was like, okay, so this is kind of like Silly Dave then, when he was doing his own thing. So in the context that I saw it, it kind of made sense. But I can imagine, like we were talking about before, if you got this brand new, you were very confused as to what was happening.
Probably so. Yeah, probably so. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, I love 1984 when it came out. Summer of 1984, Panama was everywhere. Jump, Hot for Teacher. All the videos were all over MTV. Loved it, right? Yes, 5150 comes out. It's a new singer, and it's different, but there's still some pretty cool Van Halen songs on there. I have to admit that it was in high school, 87, 88, 89. And I can't tell you the date, but somewhere in there is when I first heard Eruption. And I want to say I was 15 or 16, maybe a sophomore or so in high school.
Okay.
And I was blown away. And it kind of was when I was getting into like Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page. Like, I love guitar players. Guitar is the heart of rock and roll. Who are the best guitar players in the world? And then that comes into my world. Obviously, it had already been out for over a decade, but I hadn't heard it. They didn't play it on the radio that much. And so I hear that, I'm like, whoa, Eruption is unbelievable. Eddie Van Halen's the greatest guitar player in the world. Plus, I already liked him because he had the pop success from 1984.
Right.
So then I went out and bought the first Van Halen record, as so many people have. And I had a few buddies who were into Van Halen as well. And I'm pretty sure that during this time that OU812 had actually already come out as well, because I think that was 1988.
Yeah, it was 88.
So it was 88. So And I didn't love everything off that. I did not like Come On Baby, Finish What You Started. I just didn't think it was very rockin'. I didn't think it was really cool. So I'm like, all right, but wait. I went and found this Van Halen 1 record, and it's amazing. Running with the Devil and Ain't Talking About Love.
Start to finish.
Yeah, the whole thing is fantastic. Yeah. So I was like, so they must have more. I should go out and buy something else. And I kind of encourage my buddies to kind of do the same thing. So okay, let's not all get the same thing. Like, you go get Van Halen 2, you go get, whatever. And I think I chose Diver Down because it had Pretty Woman on it, because I liked that song, and I'd heard it on the radio along with this odd Intruder opening, which we'll get to. And maybe I'd seen the video at some point. Probably not, though. And so I took a chance on, all right, well, I've got the first one, I've got 1984. Let's see what Diver Down, the album before 1984, the run-up. Let's see what that one's all about. And so, 88, 89, that's when it came into my life.
See, that's funny because I did the exact same thing, only I picked Fair Warning instead of Diver Down. And it was
Gotcha.
because I think it's because it had Unchained and Mean Street, but it was exactly the same deal. It was like, okay, we got to divide and conquer here. You get this one, I'll get this one, then we'll all meet back here and listen to these records.
Absolutely. No, that's cool. And that's what you had to do back in the day. And
Right.
1988, 89, when a CD is like 15, 16 bucks.
Oh, yeah.
Where am I going to get 15, 16 bucks? I'm going to start driving soon. I got to have gas money. So I don't know. Anyway, so so I was like, all right, I'll give this Diver Down a shot. And I thought, okay, compared to 1984, the first album, and then the two Sammy albums that I was familiar with, I would rank it fifth of those five, to be honest with you. Even behind OU812 and 5150. I don't know if I would do that now, but back in the day, that's exactly kind of where I put it because it was just less familiar and it had all these odd songs on it.
It really, going back and looking at it now, it really seems like they just kind of had we've got these songs that are kind of floating around. They don't really kind of go together, but we can put them together and package it and put it out. But yeah, there really is no continuity.
No, and there's not a lot of meat to it. I mean, like we say, it's 31 minutes, which is incredibly short. There's five covers on here, and they're not all rock covers. Some of them are kind of odd. So, okay, that leaves 7 songs. But 2 of those 7 songs are basically intros to other songs, right? Intruder is the intro to Pretty Woman, and Little Guitar's intro is the intro to Little Guitars. So now you're down to 5 songs, one of which is Cathedral, which was always part of Ed's solo, and we'll talk about that. It's only 1 minute and 20 seconds long. So now you're talking about there's 4 original songs on an album, after you just put one out last year. That will get you some criticism, and I gotta believe they kind of earn it a little bit. If you really only put out 4 new songs, again, it's a record company pushing them, but still, there's a reason a lot of people push back against this album.
Right. And you show up to the Peaches with your money in your hand and you want me to spend full price on what is basically an EP. I don't know. I don't know if I'm pulling the trigger on that.
Exactly. But hey, bands have got to do what they've got to do. And if the record company is saying you got to put out an album and you still owe them albums, well, all right, yeah, you kind of got to put out an album, But I think it's the odd success of this album, the kind of unexpected success of it, I think bought them enough time to be able to do 1984 right.
Right. And I think now that going back to looking at it, this is like you're kind of the weird cousin who doesn't really fit into the family, but is really fun to hang around with.
Yeah. Oh, God, David Lee Roth, man. Diamond Dave, with that blonde mane, ripped abs, doing your high kicks and your what? Oh, he was a front man for his time, but he wasn't really able to go the distance, really. I mean, yes, he continued to play into his 60s. He's just kind of recently retired. He is an entertainer. There's no doubt about it, but he's not an incredible songwriter. And is he a great singer? I think he's more of a front man than a singer.
He's a great...
Well, I'm sorry. I was just going to... Whereas Steven Tyler from our last show, he's both. He's a great singer and front man. Dave's more the front man than the singer.
And he sings the Van Halen songs very well. I talked earlier about Crazy from the Heat, even though he had a stellar band behind him for especially his original solo career. Yeah. The songwriting way fell off, and you can see that in his solo records. Like, okay, they sound great. Like the musical part sounds great. The vocals and the lyrics are very subpar. Like, so to your point, yes, I think he's an entertainer. I mean, I was listening to they were on Rockline or something in 1982, and it was Alex, Mikey, and Dave. I don't know where Eddie was, but so they comes on, hey, we got Van Halen here from St. Louis or something, and then hey, Michael Anthony, Alex Van Halen, and then all of a sudden the David Lee Roth show starts. Who is that man? Yeah, who is that masked man riding in from this, on the waves of greatness or something, and then he just takes over. So to be around him would have been exhausting, just exhausting.
I think so.
The show never stopped ever.
Yeah, his mouth never stops.
And it's always just stuff like that. It's always, the cream of the crop, rise to the top, blah, 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 and he. Okay. Okay, I just want to sit here and have a beer and be quiet for 2 seconds.
But so they're huge in California, obviously. They're big in Europe because the Van Halens are from the Netherlands and they got some good traction. Hard rock is a little bit bigger over here in Europe than it was in America at the time. So that's going well for them. And obviously they're selling some records around America. The first album did very well. And it's also one of those, it might have done fine out of the gate, but it really just kind of continued to sell over time. So when 1984 comes out, that sells well. And so does the first album. When 5150 comes out, that sells well, and so does the first album. Every generation catches up with the first album because of Eruption and things like that, and it just kind of continues to sell to this day. But this was an interesting point in time for them, and I just thought on its 40th anniversary, even though it came out, I think it was April of 1982. Before 1982 is out, this is one that we wanted to review because it's an important part of the Van Halen story.
Yes, I think the events that surrounded this record would shape how the band moved on from here.
I think that's fair to say, because there's a lot of covers on here, which look, if you did a cover as your lead single, right? And then all of a sudden it's really big. Oh, okay. Well, now the record company's demanding we give them more. What do? Well, just give them some more covers, right? If the cover worked, how about some different covers? How about some more covers, But the fact of the matter is, especially once Dave left, they never really played anything off this album.
Yeah. Right. This one did kind of get lost to history. And this is where the story of this record kind of gets a little fuzzy, because I was listening to some interviews at about this time and everybody was excited. Oh, we can't, we're so excited about this record, coming out, had so much fun, revisiting these songs that we love, but that's not the story that I've heard after that. Mm-hmm. Basically, the story as I understand it is Ed was so upset with this record that he went out and built 5150 because he never wanted to be told what to do again.
Interesting.
And that was the thing, is that Warner Brothers was saying, if you want to put a record out, we want hits. We want hits. We want you to do these songs, get in there and record these. And even though, like I said, when the record was coming out, he was so excited, blah, blah, blah. He went and filed permits so that he said he'd rather go down in flames on his own than be told what to do ever again. So from that, we got the 5150 studio, which is still being used today by the one and only Mr. Wolf Van Halen.
That's right.
To do his stuff. So yeah, he really wanted a place where he could just do his own thing.
And hey, God bless him for doing that, right? Because after that, I know a lot of people are sour on the Sammy years, or Van Halen changed at that point, because when you're in the 70s and you're kids and all you want to do is sing about partying and having fun, and then you get to the 80s and maybe not Dave, but the rest of the guys are like husbands and dads and stuff like that. Your perspective changes. You sing and write different kinds of songs. And I understand that. If the audience grows up with them, that's great. But I don't think Dave ever really did or ever really wanted to.
No. And dude, what was that record he did in the 90s?
Devil, Little Is Enough.
Something, yeah. I heard something off of that. I'm like, wow.
Sensible Shoes song, like that song sucks.
Still doing the same thing. You're still stuck in like 1978, 1979. That everything's a party. It's a full-time deal. And yeah, it's just you have to move on at some point in time. And I don't think Dave ever wanted to.
Yeah, it's like you've got that one buddy who was like a big time athlete in high school or whatever. And it's like, the year after you graduate, you're like, oh, yeah, man, you were great in high school. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I was great. I scored all these points. And then like 30 years later, you want to talk about, so how's business? How's your family? It's like, do you remember how awesome I was in high school? I'm like, no, dude, I don't care anymore. I mean, I'm glad it happened. It was fun and all, but it was 30 years ago. Like, are we moving on or
Are you still wearing that Letterman's jacket? Okay.
Cool. Do you still have the VHS tapes of our basketball games? Why do you have those?
Hey guys, this is Chris from My Rock and Roll Heaven, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast.
All right, well, let's try to jump into it, because this is a short record and we tend to go long on everything. So let's jump in. You start off with Where Have All the Good Times Gone, which is a Ray Davies song, a Kinks song. And I guess Dave had a K-Tel special record that had like 30 some odd Kinks songs on it, so he could rattle them off. They already had a lot of success with You Really Got Me, which is often played on the radio in America right after they play Eruption, because Eruption's, so brief. I don't know, is it even 2 minutes? I don't think. So they would play Eruption and You Really Got Me back to back. So if you're okay, well, we're doing some covers. We can do the Kinks again, and so they start with Where Have All the Good Times Gone?
Right. And I didn't really know that this was a Kinks song, and you don't want to go long on here, so I'll be quiet on this, but to me, the Kinks do not get enough credit in the history of rock and roll. They kind of get pushed to the side a little bit. You got the Beatles, you get the Stones. Don't forget about the Kinks. They wrote some pretty cool songs.
And created distortion, and all that kind of stuff. Pretty important stuff.
Correct. We can go into that hopefully on a later episode, but I think it's very strange. So let's go back to the title real quick. Yeah. Diver Down. What is Diver Down? What does that mean? Why would you pick that? Yeah.
Well, and that's Dave, right? I mean, they put the flag up because the flag that you put on your boat when there's somebody under the water there, you put that flag up so you're not running boats real fast around there and you're careful on the surface.
Sure.
But it's a double entendre as only Dave can do.
Right.
Dive her down because he's a bit of a diver.
Yes, correct.
Of muffs.
Correct. Hey, hey, ha ha. But the other thing is too, then there's the whole, you were talking about, the diving flag and there's something going on. And his thing was, well, there's something going on underneath that you can't see. Okay. So they weren't really super excited with each other during Fair Warning. And now I'm not a psychiatrist, but Where Have All the Good Times Gone? That's what you're going to pick to say what's going on with this band.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't think of that.
Yeah, the other thing about this track is if you go back and listen to the Kinks one, it's kind of sad. Like it's a guy, I think he's supposed to be in his 40s, and it's just, like Where Have All the Good Times Gone? The music on this track does not match what they're singing. I mean, this is an upbeat, it's a pretty cool thing, but then you listen, Where Have All the Good Times? What? It works, but it's a very odd dichotomy between the music and the lyrics.
And maybe it was a reaction to like, hey, we're about to go on vacation for a few months. We could buy Ferraris, we can go to Hawaii for a month, but now we got to go back to work. I mean, where have all the good times gone? That kind of thing. I like Al's drums through this. It's got a great heavy riff and some good runs on it. But I mean, it's kind of simple compared to what we had at that point become accustomed to from Eddie, right? I mean, the solo has a little magic on it, but it's not its best.
Yes, but I think here is part of the genius of Eddie Van Halen is he knows when to give you the full face blast, and he also knows when to tone it down. This is one of those riffs where you could probably sit there and figure it out yourself if you were fairly, semi-adept at playing the guitar, and then you're like, hey, I can play this song off the record. It's simple, but it works.
I agree with you, and it's a fine way to start off the record. Like it's a rocker, so we get it going. But let's get into the second tune, which is Hang 'Em High. Great title for a Van Halen song, right? Has entendres if that's what you're looking for,
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting that Eddie said about this song, I just played that loose and I kind of just cut it and we did it. I play it better than the album every time I play it. Like every night I play it better than that because it's loose and you can do that, He does some really cool stuff at the start and then a little bit more after the first chorus. And then we're starting to get it. Okay, this is more like it. This is more like the Van Halen that we're looking for.
And this is kind of there's like two different ways that they play songs. One is that Ed does the main riff and then everybody else kind of fills in around him. Yeah, he's got a riff at the beginning, but then Mikey comes in on the bass and sets the groove. And then Ed just kind of floats around on top and peppers it in. So it's it's not like the first song at all where he's playing the main riff, but it works. And it's really fun to hear Mikey down there in the basement just grooving around.
Yeah. And I think it gave him the room. I think this is the best. It might be the best solo on the record.
Yes. I would say the same thing. And it is nice that they didn't do all covers.
Thank goodness. But he also said it was something that had been around for a while and they finally kind of pieced it together. It's like he didn't even know how good it was, the solo, because he's like, oh, I do that better every night. I'm like, no, man, it's actually pretty damn good.
Well, and that's got to be the tough thing too, as an artist, to listen to this and say, oh, I missed a note, or I could have played that better or something. But yeah, to the fans, it sounds awesome. And one of the things that they were talking about on this record is they did it a little bit differently. Like, I guess they have like they would lay down the skeleton and then they would go and come back and do the rest of the parts. But in the old way of doing things, they would do all of the skeletons first and then come back and do the rest of the song. Whereas this one, they would do it one song at a time.
Oh,
they
I
would
see.
Finish a song and then move on to the next song. And he said that worked out a lot better, focused them a little more and let them do it faster than having to revisit things 1,000 times. The other thing that he said too about Fair Warning was that there was a lot of mixing and a lot of overdubbing.
Okay.
And I think maybe on this one they told him, hey, listen, just go in there and play what you feel. And we don't really have the time or the patience
exactly.
to do another record like that where you have just zillions of hours of remixing this.
Right. No, you're right about that, But I got to make this point early in the show here.
All right.
So this song, like the 7 original songs on the album, are just like all the songs in Van Halen's catalog with Dave. All 4 members get equal contribution. Song written by Eddie Van Halen, Alex Van Halen, David Lee Roth, and Michael Anthony. It is very rare for bands to do that. And usually it leads to great longevity, right? Like REM did that. Peter Buck's like, I've done the research. The reason bands break up is because of issues over publishing royalties, right? So we'll just give everybody their fourth. And they never had a breakup. Eventually Bill Berry left, but they never had, really, people in and out. U2, same way. I got to believe that Bono writes most all those lyrics, right? Does Larry Mullen write a lot of lyrics? No. Do I need to give him a quarter? Probably not. But like, look, we came up in this together. We all came from nothing. Let's all take the royalties together. And God love him, U2 has never had a lineup change in 45 years. But Van Halen did it right, and they still had issues. They had issues with Dave. They had issues with Sammy. Eventually, they had issues with Mike. I mean, it's like, what's going on here? And I think it's at some point you got to say it's the Van Halen brothers. And although Eddie seems like an easygoing, cool guy, maybe to outsiders, but I got a feeling when he's doing business, he might be a little difficult to deal with. I'm not sure.
That's the vibe that I get. Because if you listen to people who know him casually, I met him or blah blah. He is the greatest guy. Yeah, very, very giving, very humble when he talked. But to do business with him or to be in a professional relationship, it sounds like it was very difficult.
And then he's got his brothers. So it's never just you against Ed. It's you versus both of them.
Correct. Yeah. So basically, if you're like, just say you're Michael Anthony, so basically you've got a quarter share going against half of the band because they're never going to break rank with each other.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good one. Although it's not one that I listen to a whole lot. I think that's a good, solid Van Halen song. Hang 'em high.
Okay.
Let's get to song number 3, which is another big reason that I picked up the album. Yes, I heard Pretty Woman, and that's great. But in addition to having the first album in 1984 and the Sammy records, there was a VHS called Live Without a Net from New Haven, Connecticut, from the 5150 tour. Okay.
Yeah.
And my dad had this killer stereo setup where everything was connected, including connecting the VCR into the stereo. So not only could you watch your stuff in stereo, but you could then dub it onto a cassette, which you could then listen to in your car. Okay. So, and famously, until they did Right Here, Right Now live, Van Halen never did a live album. They didn't have a live album with Dave, and they didn't have a live album with Sammy until 3 albums in. And when we were in college, that came out. It was a really big deal for us. But I really wanted a live Van Halen record. So I dubbed that cassette, the VHS, onto a 90-minute Maxell cassette. And I listened to that thing night and day. And of course, that has Eddie's live solo on it, where he does 316 before he ever laid it down on Foreign Lawful Knowledge, where he does Mean Streets intro on there.
Yeah.
He ends with Eruption, but then in the middle, he did Cathedral, and Cathedral blew me away because it's not fast tapping. It's not a lot of picking. You're taking the volume knob and you're messing with it while you do a little bit of hammering on and pulling off, I guess. I've still never seen anyone ever do anything like this in rock and roll. I've seen all the greatest rock guitarists you can list, and I've never seen anyone do anything like Cathedral other than Eddie Van Halen.
Right. And just a quick point. It was not recorded in New Haven. It was recorded in New Haven, Connecticut.
Well, that's what they call the name for that
for
night.
the evening. That's right. And honestly, this song, like when I first heard it, I was kind of like, whatever. Like it wasn't fast. It was, But then you showed me that tape.
Right.
And to watch him mess with the knob, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How did you even think to do that? That is fantastic. It's like there's a Joe Satriani tune called, I think it's Mystical Potato Head Groove.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen to it and you're like, whatever. It kind of sounds like a lot of the other stuff. But when you watch him play it live, he takes his right hand and he goes up and he grabs the neck and makes like a capo and then it's flourishing basically. So when you watch him live, it's a lot cooler. The same thing with this, like to watch him do that and you say, okay, now I understand how he makes that sound. It made it so much better. And again, just somebody who never stopped messing with, what else can I do? Well, what if I did this? Oh, okay. That sounds cool. I can make it sound like an organ. You really do feel like you're in a church.
It does.
Like, it's got to be a synthesizer or something. No. It's just playing the guitar and messing with the volume. But he did say that he got burned on a little bit because he plays it so hard that the knob would freeze up on him.
Right.
So you had to be real careful with, really just kind of being delicate with it to not just melt the thing.
No, you're right. And I remember telling people, oh, this is it's just like a minute and a half keyboard solo that Eddie Van Halen does. That's what I thought until I saw Live Without a Doubt. I'm like, holy shit, he's doing that with a guitar. Unbelievable.
And especially too, if you came into it from the 1984 days, you would just imagine it's a synthesizer like he plays on 84. No, it's not at all. This was, I don't think he did well, a little bit maybe on Dancing in the Street, but a lot of it was all guitar. There was no keyboards.
Absolutely. And you're right. It kind of sounds like you're in church with this cathedral. That's why he named it Cathedral, so that's a lot. We've talked a lot longer than the length of the song on it, but look, to me, it's an achievement in guitar heroics that I've never seen anyone before or do before or since. And he said he was, he'd been sitting on it for about a year. It didn't make it on Fair Warning. So it's like, okay, well, I can put this down, But see, even that, Jackson, which doesn't have it doesn't have any singing on it, doesn't have any lyrics, doesn't have any other instruments on it. Even for that, he only gets 1/4 of the writing for that song.
Right. And I think that is, you mentioned U2. I think they do a lot of writing in the space. Like somebody will come in with an idea and then people kind of add to it. So in that case, okay, you know what, maybe, I can see justifying
share it. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. But this is basically my composition. I did it all myself, but contractually I have to give everybody else a quarter share of this. That starts to wear on you a little bit. Yeah,
I mean, at least on Eruption, there are some drums and bass at the beginning of it, and they do that before they walk off stage to let Eddie do his thing. But on this, that's just Ed. That's all it is. So it's a little weird, but maybe that feeds into all the tensions that would eventually arise.
Right.
All right. Number 4 song is Secrets. Now, what do you think about this number 4 track, Secrets, Jackson?
It's a nice change of pace. Like it's slower, right? And so I think it works. I think again it does it. None of these songs really fit in together with each other,
right?
But when you listen to the whole thing, you're like, yeah, okay, this it works. It's different. I mean, I kind of like it. Dave is, he's doing his Dave, this soft Dave voice, like his, hey, come on over, it's me, Dave. But no, I think it works.
I totally forgot about this one. And I think I know why. I think I would listen to Cathedral when I was listening to this record. Like, oh, God, I love that. And then I wanted to get to Pretty Woman. So I would often skip it. And so I don't remember this one being what it was. Honestly, when it starts off, it sounds like it's a very 80s soundtrack movie, background music. It sounds like John Cusack be like, so I graduated from high school. I couldn't get the girl to like me. It's just that just harkens right back to that. I actually really like this. It's kind of mellow without huge guitar heroics all over it, but it's kind of got that that rhythm of the sweet road kind of thing. And but then doing some research, I saw that Dave was like, yeah, I bought a bunch of greeting cards and get well cards from Albuquerque, New Mexico that have a lot of Native American style like poetry in it. So
of course you did. Yeah,
it's got some lyrics that really it's odd, right? If you listen to the lyrics, so when you hear something like her feet are making tracks in the winter snows, she's got a rainbow that touches her shoulder. She be headed where the thunder rolls. She's as strong as mountains, walks tall as the trees. She'll be gone tomorrow like the silent breeze. He's pulling some stuff from that, but there's also like a little Dave entendre, like wait like the wind, watch where she blows. Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, Dave. We all do, But actually, this was the one I was happy to rediscover. There's usually one, at least, that you totally forgot about or you didn't understand as well when you were younger or whatever. And to me, this is that one good one. It's good to hear this one, actually.
Yeah, and I like the way that I don't even know what you would call it, like chord progressions. He kind of goes up and then down on the neck, just kind of walks it up and down. I read somewhere, I thought that he's got one of those double neck Gibsons, the
1275.
Yeah, correct. So that's cool to think about him playing the Jimmy Page guitar also.
Yeah, I'm like, thanks for telling us that, man. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. And the solo, one take.
Yeah, and I could see how, again, this was down and dirty. They were trying to get this done, and sometimes that's all you need, Ed. You don't need thousands of hours of redubbing and going over it. Sometimes you just lay it down, perfect, right off the bat.
Absolutely, so good little nugget to find secrets off of.
And I like it. And on the very, very end, he just does a little bit of bing, 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 tapping on the way out, just kind of the Eddie Van Halen signature.
Yes. All right. But now, okay. So the fifth song is called Intruder. The sixth song is Oh, Pretty Woman. All right. Correct. Like we said, they recorded Pretty Woman to be kind of like the don't forget about a song while we go take a break and then we'll get ready to do our next album. So they made a video for Pretty Woman. All right. Mm-hmm. And it was directed by David Lee Roth. I don't know why anyone thought that was a good idea. And Pete Angelus, who, was around Van Halen quite a bit. He helped design some of their lighting. He was apparently influential in creating the VH logo, which is, so iconic. And he's worked with a lot of different folks, and he worked with Hall & Oates, I think, on some of those videos. He like 4 or 5 of his videos were like nominated for Video of the Year. And yes, he did work on Hot for Teacher and Jump and Panama and all those kind of things. And he managed the Black Crowes either ever since Shake Your Moneymaker or after that, so then he worked with Jimmy Page, obviously, because he did that tour with the Black Crowes. So he's kind of an interesting guy. So the two of them made this video, and I guess they made the video, and it's pretty silly, right? They weren't interested, apparently, in doing videos at all, the band. It's like, if we're going to do it, let's have some fun with this. So Dave's like, oh, it's kind of a psychedelic, weird thing where an avant-garde art project where you do it, and 3 days later you come back and see what you got. So they basically it's bizarre. The 4 guys are in archetype costumes, like Mikey's a samurai, Alex is Tarzan with his shades, of course, Eddie's a cowboy, and then Dave's Napoleon in his mansion. All right. Meanwhile, outside of a shed or a shack, there's these 2 little people who are kind of molesting what appears to be a really hot redhead girl who's like all tied up. And then there's like appears to be, right. We'll come back to that. Mm-hmm. And there's an Igor character in the shed who's like watching this on his TV, even though it's right outside of his house. So then he calls up the 4 dudes, like, you got to come check this out. And then they come riding into their horse or swinging through the jungle or whatever they do to get there. Of course, Dave shows up in a huge limo, because that's Diamond Dave. And so this Igor guy is weird. The 2 little people with the womanish is weird. The 4 guys all weird. And then at the end, of course, the woman takes off her wig. It's actually a guy in drag. Mm-hmm. And then but they all just kind of show up and look at like what's going on here. It's not like they said stop or like They just kind of showed up and then they were there. It's one of the strangest videos you'll ever see. What happened was they filmed all that stuff and it was a minute and 40 or so too long. He's like, well, I'm not cutting this video. I'm not going to cut that. I'm not going to edit that out. This is a masterpiece. So instead, he goes and writes this intruder thing. That's what, I don't know, it's a minute 40 or something like that. It's ish something in there, it's longer than Cathedral, but it's weird. And I guess he did it on a synthesizer, but it's got a bunch of odd noises on it, like some squealing. It's not very melodic. Now, they would play it on the radio a lot in the lead up to Pretty Woman. Like they play that and then they play Pretty Woman. And I remember listening with my dad on the radio, I'm like, oh, they're playing Pretty Woman. There goes the he's like, this is horrible. We're changing the channel. I'm like, no, wait, Pretty Woman's coming. Like, they keep going, and it's a long minute 40, man. I got to tell you, especially if you're like if you don't know what it is, like this is odd. This is no good. And Dave's like, yeah, I put that on the synthesizer and we knocked it out. It was done in about an hour. I'm like, it doesn't sound like you spent an hour making it. It sounds like less. But it was interesting to me that was created because of the video that they didn't want to do in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that I was mentioning about how this looks like a woman and then it's not a woman. I think that got that banned from MTV.
Right, they didn't play that
back
much
in the day. Yeah, so you have this thing that you spend time and money on that the video channels were just like, yeah, we're not playing this. This is too out there for 1982. Now it seems silly that you would have a problem with that. But back in the day, right. And that's where I was a little bit confused too, because I thought that Intruder was something else. Like they had worked on this and then they said, no, we're doing these covers. So they threw it in there. But you're right. It was just, we need another minute 40. Hang on. I'll be back in a minute 40 and get you something.
Right.
Yeah. It's weird. It's almost like I don't even know what you would call it, atonal. I don't even know. It's off, and it's just like that weird, like that scratching noise, and then it goes into Pretty Woman, which is totally different. Whereas
exactly,
like when we'll talk about this in a minute, like little guitars, the intro to the regular, it works to the main song. This doesn't work at all. These are two things like crashing into each other.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of weird. But obviously the Roy Orbison and William Dees wrote that back in the day. Huge hit, international super hit for Roy, probably his biggest song, And Van Halen didn't do that badly with it. It went to number 1 on the mainstream rock chart, number 1 on the Billboard, number 10 on Cashbox, number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. So even to get that high in the Billboard 100 is pretty great. Did fine back in the Netherlands, the home country of the Van Halens, 33, top 20 in Canada. So yeah, it did fine for them, and it was backed with Happy Trails, which we'll get to. It's the last song on the record. So look, it worked. The Intruder part, though, is very odd. And it's just interesting to me that, again, there's 12 songs on this record, and you get a quarter right of that. Everybody does, versus they get nothing for Pretty Woman and the other 4 covers. So it's like, yeah, we're going to squeeze all these like 42 second and minute 30 second and minute 20 second quote unquote songs in here so that so when you sell a whole album, we don't get, less than half of the royalties, right?
Yeah. Could you imagine that? Like, oh, you sold 1 million, copies of this thing. Well, not really, because we don't get all the money for it. Interesting. I would say we were talking about the Kinks before. I think Orbison is in that same deal about how he does not get enough credit for putting some really classic tunes down. The problem that I always had with this is that was Orbison's shtick, I should say, about how, he was kind of this goofy looking dude who had this incredible voice and could write these songs. Diamond Dave is not the same thing. Talking about, she's walking away from me. Come on. That wasn't true. Give me a break.
Yeah, no,
come on, Dave. Give us a break.
Give us a break. It's honestly, Roy should be up there with like Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, Roy. I mean, he should be just right up there with all those guys. And the Wilburys, I remember that Tom was recording. It was like, you may have the greatest voice in all of rock history. And Roy was not, self-effacing about it. I was like, yeah, that's probably right. I've also heard a rumor. I've never seen this confirmed on the internet, but I heard a rumor that Roy was an albino and he dyed his hair jet black. And that's why he always wore his glasses. So you couldn't see his eyes, which would have been, like pink or, have no color in them. like
Okay.
what's his name? Like the two brothers with the
Edgar Winter.
Yeah, Edgar and Johnny Winter.
Johnny Winter, yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen that in print anywhere, but I've heard that rumor before. I'm like, well, that would make some sense because his hair never got gray as he got older.
Right.
And you never saw him without his shades on. So
right. And if you look at and if you look at the shades, they are very, very intense. Like, I mean, you could kill some serious ants with those things.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's like what you give to actual blind people or people with really bad
Correct.
sight to make sure no light goes in there,
right.
you know?
And that actually makes sense because I knew a guy, well, I mean, I still know him, who is an albino.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that. It's the same thing. He dyed his hair. And one time I saw him on his phone and he had the phone like an inch from his face. And I was like, what's going on there?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody's like, yeah, he's an albino. His natural eyesight is horrendous because of the condition.
Right.
So that makes sense that would be the case. But yeah, kind of a goofy dude, but could write songs. And that was his deal, is that he was this kind of, this lovelorn guy who, if she would only just turn around and take a look, is she walking back to me? This is the greatest day of my life. Dave never had that problem once. He could have been a trash man and still, I mean, because he just had that vibe about him. Like it was always a party all the time.
He did. Yeah. But Roy had a beautiful, beautiful voice.
Yes.
He was a real loss because he was really psyched when the Wilburys came out. He was really psyched to be back on top. Like, yeah, Tom Petty was already on top. That was like Tom Petty's heyday. George Harrison had kind of walked away. He's like, I can have a hit or not. I don't really care. Mm-hmm. Dylan's out doing his thing, but for Roy, he's like, we're back on top. Isn't this awesome? He's so cool.
Hi, this is Christy Alexander Hallberg, author of the novel Searching for Jimmy Page, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock podcast.
All right. Well, that was side one of Diver Down, 15 minutes of it or whatever it was. And now we move on to side two, which starts off with, yet again, a cover, Dancing in the Street. Written by Marvin Gaye, Ivy Hunter, and William Stevenson, but made famous by Martha and the Vandellas. I mean, that was a huge, super international hit for them.
Yes. This is interesting, too, because, again, I came into this after it came out. Mm-hmm. So I came into this even after the David Bowie, Mick Jagger rendition of this.
You call it a rendition. I call it an abortion. Okay. South America. What the fuck, dude? You guys suck.
Yeah. I remember watching that on Live Aid thinking, what's happening here? What are we doing? Right. This is a much better version. I didn't know that Marvin Gaye wrote that. I couldn't imagine that he didn't. I mean, the Motown was just a factory back then. Yeah. Like you were just pumping these things out all day, every day. Cool to see his name up there associated with this. Because yeah, you're right. This was, even today, this is a mega hit still. Everybody knows this.
Yeah.
And how they did it at the beginning, I think it was, what did he say he did? It was kind of like a sequencer. He took a mini Moog and then he set the echo in a way that sounds like a sequencer. It's really cool. It doesn't sound like the original, but they make it work.
No, it's cool. Yeah, it's definitely got that cool effect. And I don't know how you would make that noise, that whoop, whoop, whoop. It's really neat. And I like that it doesn't try to do all that shredding and craziness all over it. They do a really good version of the song. And, a lot of people have done this over the years. I mean, we make fun of Mick and David for doing it, but the Kinks did a nice version of it. Little Richard did it. Mamas and the Papas did it. I've heard the Grateful Dead do it on Boots before, so,
okay.
Or live albums, Dick's Picks or whatever, So, I mean, this was such a big hit for Motown and for Martha and the Vandellas that a lot of people was like, yeah, we can put our flavor onto it. And Van Halen did it. It's pretty darn good, I think.
Yeah, no, it definitely works. You remember when they did the reunion tour and they had Kool and the Gang open for them?
Oh, yeah.
And people were like, what? Kool and the Gang? What are you talking about? And he's like, well, they're a party band. We're a party band. It kind of goes together. That's what I think of when I hear they're dancing in the street. Is yes, they are this party band and they're bringing the party to you.
And by the way, I used to review all the concerts I went to for Ticketmaster, and they would almost always get published. And I was a top 100 reviewer most of my time in the 2000s, maybe top 50 for a little while. They did not accept my Van Halen reunion review because I said, yes, Kool and the Gang opened for them, and they were better than Van Halen, and they didn't want to hear that.
Ooh. Well, I'll tell you, I heard the live record that they put out from that tour, and it sounded pretty rough.
That's another show for another day, right? Let's move on to the next little odd thing. Okay, so Little Guitars is the next song, really, but there's a 40 or so second intro called Little Guitars Intro. It sounds like Spanish acoustic, but apparently it was made with a custom tiny Les Paul that was not even 2 feet long, and that's kind of where the Little Guitar name of the song came from. Didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know it. I mean, I'd seen pictures of it before, but I didn't think it was a real thing. I thought it was like something that he practiced with or something, this little baby Les Paul. But no, apparently he picked it up, he liked it, and used it on this track. He said he was listening to something called Montoya. It was a group, I think, out of Southern California, and he really liked that sound, like the flamenco, but he couldn't figure out how to do it on his own. So he just messed with it until he could. You play the strings with the pick, the higher strings with the pick, and then you just kind of hammer on the lower part, boom, 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 boom,
the bass strings,
boom, boom. So you're playing it you're basically playing 2 parts at the same time. And I've seen it done before, and it just, I mean, I can't even, walk and chew gum at the same time. That it just looks very excellent when someone plays it like that.
Yeah, Dave's like, well, it sounds like a Mexican song, so I'm going to write a song for the senoritas there, and he starts doing his thing, right? And, you can, senorita, do you need a friend? But here it is. Here's the one that I really want everyone to hear. Can't crow before I'm out of the woods, but there's exceptions to the rule. I think he's talking about pulling out. I'll say it again. Can't crow till I'm out of the woods, but there's exceptions to the rule. Yeah, it's called wearing a rubber, Dave. And when you're on tour, that's exactly what you ought to be doing.
Hopefully.
I think it's ridiculous that the Little Guitars intro was its own 40-second song, and then Little Guitars was a separate song. I think that's playing the game of, you get 1/12 of the writing for 12 songs, you get 1/10 of the writing for whatever. And it's like, we've got so many covers, we've got to put more of our own stuff on here. So let's break this into 2 parts. And now we get 2 writes instead of 1. I don't know. It does sound like Van Halen.
Yeah. And I've never heard this song one without the other on
the radio.
It's one. Yeah, it is one song. You would never do that. Like, I mean, I could see how like Eruption and You Really Got Me, they just kind of go together because that's the way it is on the record.
Right.
This is one song.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you another funny thing about it, because when he's saying catch as catch can in the song, when I was a kid, I didn't really know that phrase, just like I didn't know the phrase Caught Up in You by 38 Special. So I thought they were saying Call Up in You. I thought Dave was singing about his Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah. Oh,
Etch-a-Sketch, Etch-a-Sketch, Etch-a-Sketch. He's like, why is Dave singing about his Etch-a-Sketch? Doesn't he have better toys to sing about at this point? Etch-a-Sketch, Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah, I think everybody heard. Well, every high school or middle schooler heard that, because catch can't. What? No one. You didn't know that. You didn't know that phrase, and he doesn't even really say it like that. He just says catch as catch
can, and then it's the next line that he starts with can. So it's like, it sounds like he's singing about his Etch-a-Sketch. That's all I know.
And again, if you don't have the liner notes back then, you don't know what he's saying.
No, exactly. I think I don't know if you got all the lyrics in there or not. I obviously I don't have all my records with me, so I can't even go look. I think there was a picture of them when they were on tour in '81, opening for the Rolling Stones in our old neck of the woods, Orlando, I think.
Okay, yeah. It's a picture of them, but from behind. So you see the band and then the crowd, and they're giving the wave on the way out. Yeah, I really like that picture.
But back in the day, I'm like, wow, they played some huge shows back in the day. It's like, well, yeah, they're opening for the Stones. Just part of the mystique, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that. Number 10 song, Big Bad Bill is Sweet William Now, written by Milton Ager and Jack Yellen. This is a funny one, man. I mean, this is very Diamond Dave.
Right. And that's why I said, like, when I heard this originally, like, I had already heard the Just a Gigolo song, so I'm thinking, okay, so this is like silly Dave.
Right. But I didn't realize this as a guy who grew up in Louisville and has lived there, almost 40 years over the course of his life. I knew that Dave was from Indiana, and I guess he's from near Bloomington, which is where in a university is. You've been there, your brother went there. And I guess he said he had this little radio, and if he pointed it the right direction at the right time of day, he'd get some odd radio stations from down in Louisville. And I guess this one is one he picked up because in the opening lines, it went down to Louisville. There's a cat named Big Bad Bill. And I'm like, I never realized that, But, it's a funny when he's talking about what a badass he is. He goes around beating up people. He goes, but Bill got himself a wife. Now he leads a different life. And it's so funny. It's so very Dave. Also didn't realize that that's Eddie and Alex's dad playing the clarinet all over that thing. Yeah, it's kind of got that big band swing to it, and a lot of it's because of Jan Van Halen.
Yeah, and this is one where it's a silly song, but I would have loved to have been there to watch Eddie and Alex play with their father. Yeah, and just be in awe of him. And I guess the deal was that he hadn't played for a while. And so they really had to talk him into doing it. And he was like, nah, I'm rusty and man, I'm going to make mistakes. And Ed's like, the mistakes are what sound great. I mean, it just, it makes that song. And I would imagine that they had to do it kind of together, like all,
at once. Yeah.
That's what it sounds like to me. So to watch them do that it would have been great. It
would have been so cool. Yeah, absolutely.
There's a Sony Walkman, blah, blah, blah. There's a quote here from Dave saying, I think when you hear Mr. Van Halen playing. So I like that reverence to, this is the senior member. This is where these guys came from. They got their love of music from this dude to kind of pay it back. That's cool that he uses not, Ed's dad or whatever. It's Mr. Van Halen.
Mr. Van Halen. That's exactly
correct.
Right. Yeah. And, sadly, he would die about 5 years later at the age of 66, but he did live just a little bit longer than Ed, who only made it to 65.
Yeah, and I think that that they wanted him to do it with them, like at the Hollywood Bowl or something live, and he was just like, "No, I can't. I just can't. I'm too nervous." Yeah.
All right, but look, you gotta love that one. Obviously, it may not be a huge hit or whatever. It's not like the great rock riffs that we've come to love Van Halen for, but as far as them having some fun and doing a Dave type of song, plus it's got Mr. Van Halen on it, you gotta love that one.
Yes, that definitely ups the cool factor. And I can imagine, like, when he brought it in there, they were like, "What? We're not going to do this." And then he kind of would talk them into it, and then getting the senior Van Halen on there, it makes it a lot cooler. And it's just kind of a silly track, and it shows that they kind of have a humorous side to them too. It's not all business all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, they're having some fun.
Yeah.
And then, well, let's see. We get on to the 11th track, or 5th on the second side. That's The Full Bug, which to me sounds very Van Halen. I mean, it's like some of these are odd in the catalog, but then this is kind of back to, it's got that Dave squeal at the start. It's got the harmonies with the O's and the oohs.
Yeah.
And it's got a guitar harmonica duel, which you don't hear a lot. And so that makes it kind of cool.
To me, this harkens back to the Ice Cream Man. You get that.
A little bit.
You get the acoustic intro, which I think Dave played. And then,
that's right.
Kind of the Dave, his essence coming through here. Like, this is, hey, look at me. I'm the coolest guy ever, with this blues thing. And then you throw in the Van Halen guitars and the harmonica played by Dave. Yeah, it definitely sounds very Van Halen, and it fits in with the rest of the stuff. And again, it's a nice transition in between Big Bad Bill and then Happy Trails at the end.
Yeah, and it may be the second best guitar work on the album. If we like Hang 'em High the best, I would say that this is up there. It's kind of cool, but it kind of seems like they didn't take a ton of time on it, which of course they didn't, right?
Yeah, and sometimes that's where the magic is.
That's right. But Dave, let me show you the best part of the man. I'm like, we know what you're talking about, Dave. We get it. You want to have sex with girls. We understand.
I know what you're talking about. I know what you're always talking about.
But God bless you, David Lee Roth. We need you in the world.
Yes. Yeah, you need that foil to the genius of Eddie Van Halen. Yeah, you need somebody to come in there and talk about how, I'm going to show you the best part of a man. Or Ice Cream Man with the, all flavor, guaranteed to satisfy. Yes, we got it. Thank you. Yep. Thank you so much.
And then of course they finish off with Dale Evans, bum-ba-dee-da, bum-ba-dee-da, bum-ba-dee-da-dee-da-dee-da. I mean, it's just quick and easy. It was the B-side to The Pretty Woman. They're just looking to go on vacation. So like, oh, we need a B-side? Okay, let's just do that. It's like, oh yeah, we can put it on the end of the album. So now the album's not 29 minutes and 58 seconds. Now it's 31 minutes and 4 or whatever. It's still such a short album. Here's the thing. We may just use that as our outro music from now on. Just like, it's just like, all right, thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next week on The Wolf.
It does kind of showcase that they can sing harmony. Well, at least Mikey can sing harmony. So that was always underrated in the band. But I guess they used to do "You Really Got Me," half of it, then stop, bring Alex out front, sing this, and then go back into it as their second encore. So I would love to have seen that, have them stop the show, sing this kind of goofy, you've already been there for an hour plus, you've been beat up, hear this, and then it's time to go.
That's interesting. That is interesting. And the thing is, I've never in my life seen Dave on stage playing a guitar and singing. But apparently back when they were just getting started, he would often bring out the acoustic guitar and do Ice Cream Man, when they were doing their shows back in the day. He played the acoustic guitar on the Full Bug, so it's not like he has no musical ability. He just doesn't show it off on stage. He's just the singer. Again, he's an entertainer. He's not a musician. He's an entertainer.
Yeah, and it's hard too. Like, you're also going to play guitar with Eddie Van Halen? Nah, maybe I won't, because that's probably not the best idea.
Yeah, you're strumming an acoustic,
right?
Doing, something like Down in the Valley or something like that. Well, he's going, you're just going to look foolish, Although, I mean, when they did on that Live Without a Nut, they opened with "There's Only One Way to Rock," which is a Sammy song. Yeah, and Sammy can do a little bit of guitar work. I mean, he's not just strumming an acoustic; he can actually jam a little bit,
Oh yeah, no, he's really. I've seen him play. He's a very solid player. Especially on the rhythm side, yeah, absolutely.
But that's it. That's your 31 minutes. So it has a couple of pretty good ones. Got some really weird ones. A lot of short ones. But that's your 4 million seller in the U.S. Which leads into 1984, which is one of the most important albums of the 80s, one of the most important albums to early MTV, and one of the most important albums to you and me growing up, dude.
Absolutely. That's why I couldn't believe we haven't done it yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to it because that's going to be a long episode, folks, just so you know.
Yeah. And our episodes are getting longer because we don't know when or how to shut up. Also, as long as you're not listening on YouTube, we are putting clips of the tunes in there so you know what we're talking about here. But look at the success. I mean, 4 million in the US, platinum in Canada. We talked about how Pretty Woman hit #1 mainstream rock, #12 on the Billboard. But Dancing in the Street was 3 and 38 on those same charts. And even Secrets got the top 25 on mainstream rock. Little Guitars got top 35. Where have all the good times gone? Top 20. Full Bug got on the charts. So people were digging this and they were putting them out there. Radio stations were playing Van Halen. They were popular. They knew that something big was on the way.
And I think that they are the only band that's ever sold platinum, ever gone platinum with their first 5 records.
Is that right?
And yeah, I mean, everything went platinum for them. I think everything went platinum except maybe Van Halen 3, maybe.
Oh, Van Halen 3 did not. No, yeah, you're right.
Well, but everything else was, I mean, even this, which was a cover record and not truly, Van Halen original, still went platinum. They sold ungodly amounts of records.
Tons. They had 2 diamond selling records, and neither of them's a greatest hit. That's pretty hard to do. That's very rare. You've got to be like Pink Floyd or Def Leppard. It's very odd. I mean, the Eagles did that, sure, but one of them was a greatest hits album. So
right.
As an American selling rock band, you got to be named Aerosmith or the Eagles to have outsold Van Halen.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably one of those things where they as much as this is a crazy thing to say. They don't get enough credit for being the band that they were, because especially for us, because they switched lead singers there kind of when we got into it. So we never got the full effect of seeing these records come out when they did. We kind of backed into them.
Right, because we were a little bit young. But the other reason I don't think they get the acclaim that they really should, because if you ask people who the greatest guitar player in the world was from like 1984 to 1994, almost everybody said Eddie Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen, or at least he would be in the top 3 or something like that. But people don't say that as much anymore, because for the last 25 years, they basically put out nothing. The Van Halen 3 was a misfire. People just kind of ignored it. They did some greatest hits albums. They released some stuff that had been around for a while. And then I guess Different Kind of Truth had some newer stuff on it. But like when they do Bullet Head, well, that was around since the 70s. They just never put it down on an album, So it's like for 25 years, they basically didn't do anything. And while they did have a couple of tours, okay, we're back with Dave and we're doing it now, not Mikey, but we've got Wolfie on board. It's still just, although I went, and I'm glad I did, it just didn't quite recapture the magic that was Van Halen, and they never moved on. They never kind of got over Van Halen 3 didn't work, so we're not really doing no music anymore.
Yeah, and I remember watching Live Without a Net thinking, I mean, this is great, but if I'd have shown up to the 5150 tour as a fan from the Dave days, I would have been very, very upset that I paid money to watch Eddie Van Halen play keyboards for most of the show. Sammy plays a lot of guitar in that incarnation. He does the solos and everything, but he spends a lot of time back there on the keyboard. So even when we caught up to them, the days of him being like the guitar god were kind of, he was moving more toward piano at that point in time.
That's right. He's playing more piano, right now, that's a hell of a lot of Ed piano on there. And like we said, you grow up, you have kids, you have a family, and you approach the world differently. You write songs differently. You approach your instrument differently. And so Van Halen did evolve. But usually there's at some point, they're like, you know what, we're going back to basics. We're going to come back. Even when Dave came back to the band, we're going to go back and do things the way it just, I don't know if it was the drugs and alcohol or what. It was like the creative part of Ed was gone once you hit the new millennium.
Yeah, he did struggle with some pretty heavy duty substance abuse problems. And I don't know, it's hard to keep reinventing yourself too. I think at a point in time, you kind of just get tired of it. You get tired of it. You're always going to be compared to the stuff that came before that. So maybe you're just like, I don't even want to mess with this anymore. I've kind of lost that fire to be this person. But I know one thing that he did say was that, I think people might say that all my stuff sounds the same. It doesn't.
No,
especially on this record. He's got a sound, like when you hear something, you say, I know that's Eddie Van Halen, but this stuff does not sound the same. He changes it up enough. So he's got a very distinctive way of making the same effects sound different on these songs.
Well, and 20 years, it seems to me. Now, look, this is not me doing a lot of scientific research on this. Obviously, a lot of bands don't make it for 20 years, or if they do, they have a lot of low points along the way. But if you look at certain bands after 20 years, they kind of drop off. Van Halen, after 20 years, they're doing Van Halen 3. Okay, yeah, that's a drop off. Kiss, from 74 to Revenge, they're doing a lot of stuff. But then after that, there's a big drop off. The Stones, 62 to 82. Yeah, Tattoo You is great. But then once you get into Undercover of the Night and that kind of stuff, it's like, this is not that great anymore. So and obviously we can even debate those bands. There were some high points and low points along the way, but it's like after 20 years it's kind of like, I'm a different person now. Life is different now, and you shift gears.
And your priorities change. And I think you get tired of everything you're doing being compared to the stuff that came before it. Like this is something new. This is something new I want to do. This is something, it's a different, I don't want to keep retreading the same thing over and over again. And it sounds like that's all you people want is just Van Halen 1 all over again.
But look, it's a fun listen. It's not a long one. So go ahead and enjoy it as best you can there. Look, it's an important part of their legacy. It sold very well. It got, in the top whatever all over the world, lots of airplay. It just kind of helped set them up for what would become the mega success of 1984, which would also allow for the band to break up, and we can get into that on another show.
Yeah, and I would say this is probably not anyone's favorite record, but I think it definitely it has its place, and it is a fun listen when you go through it.
Well, that wraps episode number 107 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London, folks, on Van Halen's Diver Down. Of course, Van Halen, very important to guitar heads like me and Jackson growing up. Growing up in the summer of 1984 was huge for us. So going back and finding the album that preceded 1984 and Diver Down, it was almost a rite of passage. And of course, it had all those covers like Dancing in the Streets and Pretty Woman and Happy Trails on there. But there was a few bright spots in there as far as the new songs went. And I don't know, look, if you've got 5 covers on there, then you're probably going to make a bunch of little short songs to make up for the revenue that you're giving away by doing all those covers. Bottom line is, it hit the charts in a big way. It sold 4 million in the US alone, and it bought them some time to be able to go in and do 1984 right. And of course, that paid off in a big, big way. And like Jackson said, yeah, one day we'll definitely be doing 1984. We do like to do these things around anniversaries. We chose this because it was still 2022, which means it's the 40th anniversary of this, even though it came out in April. So you might have to wait till 1984. But here's the thing, folks, it's really only about 13 months away till that's 40 years old, if you can believe that. So as usual, folks, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You have got to let us know. You send us an email, uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can also DM us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. You can check us out on YouTube. You can check us out on Instagram. You can let us know the albums, the bands, the concerts, the DVDs, the books, the rock properties you want us to review. And next week, hey, we're going to bring in a very special guest, someone who has dozens of gold and platinum records to their name, worked with some huge artists over the years. We're going to have a fun time talking about his new single and some of the work he's done in the past 70s, 80s, and 90s. You're going to know a lot of what we'll be talking about. A little bit of a surprise, I know, but you'll just have to tune in next week to get that one. So thanks as always to Pantheon Pods. We're very proud to be part of the Pantheon podcast network of shows. Special thanks to rarevinyl.com. There's still a little time before the holidays, guys. Go to rarevinyl.com, use the code podcast. You can get 10% off all of your orders and get them there in great shape for the holidays. Do that now. It's rarevinyl.com. So I guess it's happy trails to all of you out there. And remember, folks, to all of you rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.